The 9 accelerators of successful retirement planning. Lifetime financial forecasting. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast with me, your host, Justin King. If you're thinking about your retirement or already retired, you're in the right place. My aim is to help you plan for and live a successful and meaningful retirement. Retirement is far more than just a financial event. It's a significant life event, a major transition, which will bring with it new challenges and opportunities. So each episode contains tips, information, and inspiration to help you feel more informed and confident about your retirement. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Retirement Cafe podcast. I'm so pleased you've tuned in. This week's podcast is the second in a series of 9 episodes all about what I call the 9 accelerators of a successful retirement. If you missed the first podcast, which was on life priorities, you'll find it on our website, theretirementcafe.co.uk, or your preferred podcast player. You'll also find a link to the show notes to this episode. As I mentioned last week, aside from being the host of the Retirement Cafe podcast, I'm a chartered and certified financial planner specializing in helping people retire successfully at my boutique retirement planning firm, MFP Wealth Management. Now, over the years, I've helped over 100 couples plan for the retirement they desire and the retirement they deserve. And during this time, we've created a clear framework for what we believe needs to happen for people to be able to retire with confidence, clarity, and choice about how they spend their retirement. We call this framework our Retirement Success Program, and it contains 9 accelerators. These are the areas of planning we consider with each and every client when helping them plan for their retirement. So it makes sense to share these accelerators in a podcast series to help you identify any gaps in your own retirement planning. Following on from identifying your life priorities, the second accelerator for planning successful retirement is lifetime financial forecasting. Today, again, my wife and business partner, Kathy, will be sitting in the interview seat. So welcome back to the podcast, Kathy.
Hello. Here we are again, episode 2.
Absolutely. So what you got for me?
Well, I thought maybe you could start just really briefly recapping on the first accelerator, which was life priorities, and why we started there.
Well, I think with everything, I mean, the money is only there to support a great life. And what does a great life look like? And that is not always absolutely clear. You know, I was chatting to a client this morning, and he's literally just taken early voluntary redundancy. And I said, so what's next? You know, and with all honesty, he doesn't know as yet. I mean, we're going to do some work around that, but yeah, it's this year has been a big year for him, obviously COVID, etc. And all of a sudden he's retired. He can afford to retire. There's no problems there. We've got the financial planning in place, but what is he going to do with, he's not even 55. So, hopefully he's got a long time of a happy and hopefully fulfilling retirement. So working around that, what would be a really fulfilling time for you is hugely important.
Great. So let's assume we've done that. So the second accelerator is quite a big one, isn't it? That's what we're talking about today in some more detail. And that's the lifetime financial forecasting. So what is that?
Right. Well, we need to, as I said, we need to understand what people's savings, retirement savings, assets, etc. can provide for them. And the key question I suppose every retiree has got is, and the concern is, I don't want to run out of money. And some people really do know they're not going to run out of money because they've got substantial assets. And then there's some other questions around what's the best use of my money. But I suppose the first number one concern is have I got enough to provide for myself, possibly my spouse, and my family for the rest of my life? Because I've stopped work. I'm not acquiring any more assets. So
that's a big question, isn't it? Yeah. So I was just going to say, that's a really big question, isn't it? Will my money outlive me, or will I outlive my money?
Yeah, it's huge. And, there's an awful lot of unknown there as well. But as I always try and explain, with every journey, we don't know exactly how it's going to pan out, but it doesn't mean you don't get a plan. So I often use as you know, I'm a sailor or an ex-sailor, and I might not know the exact course if I come out of Mudderford Harbour and set off across Christchurch Bay. I might not know the exact course to steer my yacht to get to New York, but I've got a bit of a clue. I know it's generally west. So it doesn't mean that I wouldn't create a course to steer, wouldn't have an idea how long it's going to take me, wouldn't have a look at what the prevailing weather forecasts are, with the whole knowledge that actually it's all probably going to pan out quite differently than I expected. The weather forecast gets less and less accurate the further and further out it goes. But I can have an idea. Well, how far will I travel? How far have I got to travel? How fast will I travel, and what direction do I need to steer my yacht to get to my final destination? So there's a lot of inputs that we will put in a passage plan, and a financial retirement plan is very similar.
So what's the first step then? I mean, presumably the first step is kind of having an end goal. I mean, you need to have something to build around, or how do you start building a financial forecast, a lifetime financial forecast?
Well, of course, the number one number, I suppose, is when am I going to die? And on the basis that we don't know that as yet, hopefully, that we've just got to look at, some statistics and kind of work out. Now, if you live on the south of England and you're a couple and you're in reasonable health as you enter into retirement in your 60s to 65, there's a good chance that one of you is still going to be around in your 90s. So this is a 30-year time horizon. So you may not be average. I mean, average could mean one of you is living into the 90s, but that means you could also push 100. And that's an awful long time to make sure your money lasts. So I suppose the first quote, that financial forecast needs to run kind of beyond your expected life expectancy, because you may not be average. Now, of course, you might go early, but if you're dealing with a couple who've been in relatively good health and, as I say, lived in the south of England and maybe looked after themselves and eaten well, etc., and kept fit, yeah, they've got a good chance of going a long time. So planning for that end date and extending that end date beyond what you think might be real.
Okay, so we've got our end date, and we talked a bit about the inputs that you need to gather to build this plan. Can you explain a bit more about what those inputs are?
Yeah, so I would suggest anyone who's trying to plan their retirement is to, and maybe right before way before they actually get there, is to look at a number of fundamental things. So, are you going to get a state pension? Get a state pension forecast, find out whether there's any gaps in your history. Is it worthwhile topping up any gaps in your state pension history? Do some calculations around that. We can put some links on the show notes for that, where people can go and find out the right information. So that probably underpins a lot of people's retirement planning. But of course, if you're retiring at 50 or 55 or 60, you may not get your state pension for a number of years. So first of all, understand what that state pension is, but then also work out when you're actually going to receive it. Then we're trying to gather all that other information. I mean, over a 30-year career, you may have worked for numerous employers. So gathering all the information and understanding what it's likely to provide. Getting forecasts from the different providers, understanding when they're going to start to be paid, and also, even more importantly, understand whether they're going to pay an increasing income. That is hugely important. So gathering the details, look at all assets, investments, pensions, rental properties, whatever it may be, future inheritances, etc. Bring it all together and get an understanding. What is it that I've got that I can then use, in essence, to provide for the retirement that I deserve?
So that sounds like somebody could pop that into a spreadsheet. Is it that simple?
Yeah, no, it is. It is. You could pop it into a spreadsheet. And I think that'd be a great thing. We often get presented with spreadsheets with people's, scenarios of what they've got, and that's really useful. The difficulties arise when you're gathering lots of different scheme details together and you're trying to work out the interaction between them. So understanding which ones are increasing at different inflation rates, understanding what spouses' benefits will be received by if in the event of you dying early. Are there any death benefits? Will the benefits be lost on death? What happens if you die before retirement? So there's a number of implications there. But in essence, the key factor is what we're trying to do is we're trying to take the assets. We've also got to take into account what someone's expenditure is likely to be. Now, you might say, well, it's quite difficult to do. Again, because how on earth would I know what my expenditure is going to be in my retirement? Again, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't make a plan, or even just working out, okay, so that's a starting point. What do we currently spend? Right, okay. If we currently spend that, is that likely to continue? Well, the kids have left home and this, that, and everything else, and we've paid the mortgage off. Okay, so we make some adjustments for that. But start with what you're currently spending. And the right way to look at spending is not about looking at all your bills. It's actually looking at probably what's the income coming in, net income, and what are the net savings. Because we often get expenditure underreported. So people say they're not spending all this, and they say, well, they're only spending, I don't know, £40,000 a year, and they've got income of £100,000 a year. So I'm saying, well, net income of £100,000 a year. I'm saying, so you must be saving £60,000 a year. And funnily enough, they're not. So it's disappearing in discretionary spend, as we call it. And that's absolutely fine. But it is just understanding what people are spending at the moment and what do you think you'll continue to spend in retirement. And sometimes, that's, as I say, it's quite difficult for people to actually understand. The key thing we've got to do, once we understand that expenditure, at an inflation rate of 3%, the cost of living is going to rise nearly 2.5 times in a 30-year retirement.
Wow.
So, it will cost about £2.50 for every pound that you spend at the beginning of retirement by the time you get to the end. Now, that's pretty significant. And therefore, will your income match that increase in inflation? And that's just that's a baseline of a 3% inflation. It could be higher, it could be lower, but just as a starting point, right? Okay, so 3%, we're going to need to match that increasing income. This is the point that your spreadsheet starts to become a little bit more complex because, of course, we've got interaction of different pensions growing at different rates. We've got investment returns, which you need to be able to manipulate. We've got tax, which you need to be able to manipulate. We've got and obviously the longevity, which we need to do, and different incomes coming in at different points of time. So, if I draw down from this pot for 5 years and then I take it from this pot and then this pension pays out at that point and then I die. And this is where your spreadsheet can become a bit unwieldy. And actually, when I first started out in this world, that's what we did do is build spreadsheets. But now we have bespoke financial planning software that models all this stuff and keeps up to date with all the taxation and legislation changes for us to build these models for clients.
Yes, I can see how that can get quite complicated and difficult to get your head around on an Excel spreadsheet. But obviously, things change, don't they? And you talked about the software being able to take account of tax changes, and you can change inflation and what have you. But other things change. So how do you kind of handle a forecast in that respect? So you get somebody. Beginning of 2021, they come to you and you build a financial plan. Great, is that it?
Well, you're right. I mean, many years ago, I did some exams at the time in advanced pension qualifications, and there was a period of time where they used to talk about pension simplification, and it was all a big lie. It's got more and more complex since then. I mean, if you'd have started out with a plan 25 years ago when I started advising on pensions and retirement planning and believed that the rules were going to stay the same, and suddenly woke up from your induced sleep this morning and went, oh, let's have check out, see how everything's gone on, you'll have got yourself into a heap of trouble because everything has changed. The amount that you can pay into pensions has changed. The amount that you're allowed to gather into a pension scheme has changed. The dividend taxation of pensions have changed. There's so much has altered over the years, and probably successive governments will continue to tinker with them. So I think a bit like coming back to my sailing analogy, the weather will change, the tidal currents will shift, the equipment that we have will founder and break, and you'll have to run repairs. You'll have to shift your sails. You have to continually look at your current position, and then work out a new strategy going forward, depending on what the conditions are at the time.
Absolutely. So how frequently would you suggest that people do review and kind of adjust accordingly their lifetime financial forecast or their cash flow, which is another term for it, isn't it? Sometimes referred to as a cash flow or financial plan.
Yeah, well, the model, I think, as I say, the only guarantee about these models is that they will be wrong. And I don't think you want to be checking on a daily or weekly basis. It's a bit like investments. Again, the more information is not serving you. But once a year to sit down and appraise and just go, okay, are we on track? What legislation has shifted? What changes have happened? What's the investment returns that we've received been? Are there better value products? Are there better value investments that we can purchase? And the taxation changes, staying up to date with what is happening. I mean, pensions are, they get tax relief going in, but they're also taxed coming back out. So therefore, we've got to look at everything in the round and go, okay, so are we better off paying into an ISA? Are we better off paying into an unwrapped investment and suffering capital gains tax, but utilizing a dividend allowance? Are we better off being offshore? There's so many ramifications to people's personal circumstances that, as you know, we do an annual review with our clients. But before we do the annual review, before we meet with them, we've already got, because we know their circumstances, we've already kind of got an agenda of things that we need to discuss with them, because we know that they're going to have an impact on their lives and their families' lives.
And then obviously things that are outside of our control as well. Well, you've talked about some of those, but in terms of our health, so if someone suddenly becomes ill, then that can dramatically change a forecast, can't it?
Yeah, and of course, there's the terminal illness. They actually die. What is the scenario? We always model that. So we model an early mortality. We model an early illness, i.e., what is going to happen if they don't get to retirement, and if they're trying to fund for a retirement but they don't get there and they can't contribute enough because they haven't been able to earn. So we just model 3 or 4 different scenarios to just illustrate to people. This is kind of, these are the different case studies that we can put in front of you. What will investment rates return? What happens if we have a stock market crash the day before you retire? What happens if one of you is not here? If one of you's temporarily disabled or permanently disabled or in some way, shape or form? Just to give you a bit of a steer to understand and go, okay, so how do we model this? What's our best guess of how we do the planning from here onwards? And it is more information will allow us to have a better discussion with the client. We don't go to, there's no point running 17 different models. We just get bamboozled by the amount of information. But just some key ones of, okay, what are the pitfalls that I'm seeing that they may not have seen themselves?
Absolutely. And the software that we use Voyant, don't we? So that gives a graphic visualization for clients of what that future looks like. And I think the number of times that you've had clients kind of go, oh wow, or whatever that response is, but it's the first time they've actually graphically seen what their financial future looks like. And I think it can be quite enlightening, can't it?
Yeah, I think so. And then we can model what people's inheritance tax will be, and we can model so what their legacy is. We often model in what happens if we've got to pay for the cost of care. It's another. Not only is have I got enough money to live the rest of my life in the way that I want to live it, be. Secondly, possibly also, can I afford to give money to my children or grandchildren to help them on maybe on housing ladder or education? And then thirdly, what happens if I've got to go into care? Or I don't want to go into care. Can I afford to have care at home? And then we model that as well. And, again, let's hope that doesn't happen. But we know that a certain amount of the population will need assistance as they live longer. And therefore, we need to put that into their financial forecast.
But we've talked a lot about, the scenario planning and the bad things that might happen. But actually, it having clarity about what their money will provide and allow them to do in retirement actually gives people a lot of sense of freedom, doesn't it?
Yeah, and peace of mind. I mean, obviously, we've had a lot of feedback from clients over the years, and that's their number one takeaway, isn't it? It's that what is it like working with a good financial planner? Well, it gives me confidence and peace of mind. I think, but I think there's an awful lot of people listening who will not use someone like ourselves, and so I hope that this is not saying that we are the only solution. If you sit down with a spreadsheet and you do a bit of modelling and you move your cost of living up by 2.5-3% a year for the next 30 years, it's not the most difficult thing to do on a spreadsheet. There's plenty of YouTube videos that will show you how to do that if you're not well versed in that, and then go, okay, so what are my income going to be? You'll get a bit of a steer. And that's you might not go to the levels of complexity that we're going to go to, but you'll get a bit of an idea. And any plan is better than no plan at all. So having some kind of idea of what it's looking like, what it looks like. I mean, if you're in the lucky position of just getting a state pension and a nice defined benefit pension because you've been working for one of the companies who used to provide those, or maybe the civil service who still do, it's pretty clear and easy to understand what your income's going to be. You don't have to do an awful lot of this modelling. The death benefits are nice and clear. You understand that you'll lose your state pension if you die, but your spouse will inherit 50% of your guaranteed defined benefits or final salary pension plan, and you know what the indexation of that will be, i.e. what it will grow at. That's what's not to like about that situation. You don't need to get to the level of complexity of the stuff that we need to manage. So for those people, I think, an Excel spreadsheet will serve you really, really well.
Absolutely. And then for those people that are thinking perhaps their financial affairs are a little bit more complicated, perhaps got a number of different defined contribution pensions and need to go into a little bit more detail, what should they be looking for in a financial advisor / financial planner? I mean, what kind of either skills or qualifications or experience, or what should they be looking for in what they offer?
Right. Well, of course, I'm probably going to now trot out everything that I am. So, which is, but I've only attained the qualifications because I think they're deemed necessary. So to test yourself to make sure that you are well equipped to give retirement advice. I think as a minimum now, a chartered financial planner is really useful. That chartered financial planning qualification is tested technical knowledge to a pretty good standard. I really like someone who's also a certified financial planner, CFP. That's a global standard. It's run by another organization. So the chartered financial planning is run by the Chartered Insurance Institute, and the certified financial planning is examination and qualification is run by CZ in the UK. So if you can find someone with chartered financial planner and chartered wealth manager, or the certified financial planning ticket, that's really excellent. I think there's only about 1,000 in the UK with that ticket. I'm not absolutely, don't hold me to that, but I think there's about that many. So it's not a huge amount of the 20 odd thousand financial advisors there are in the UK. Also, if you can find someone who's SOLA accredited, the Society of Later Life Advisors, they've gone through some further qualifications to actually understand exactly what happens in the event of someone needing care and how they pay for care and those qualifications as well. That to me is probably the retirement kind of gold standard you're looking for. And ideally someone who specializes in that type of work, because you could have all those qualifications, but actually not actually advise people on retirement planning. So, because your speciality is, I don't know, working with American expats or something. So you want to make sure maybe that actually when you hit their website that you go, right, okay, they do deal with people like me. But that's probably what I would look for. Go and meet them. See if you can. We run a system where you can pay for a financial plan, and you don't need to go and start buying, investments and pensions and all those types of things. You can get a retirement plan. And you just pay a fee for that. And I think that's a very clean and it's a service with integrity and honesty, and that you just know that the intention is not to sell you stuff. The intention is to provide you with a robust retirement plan that you can revisit every year for a further fee, but you can just get that planning work done if you want to just manage your own investments and savings, etc. yourself. So maybe that's a good thing to ask people, whether the advisor that they're considering, will ask them whether they would do that as well.
Yeah, and more people are doing that, aren't they? More and more advisors are working in that way, aren't they? Absolutely, splitting out the investment work from the pure financial planning work.
Absolutely, and you know what? I'm very lucky to know a number of years of doing talks and in the business. I know good financial planners dotted around the country. Some really, really great financial planners. And if any listeners want to reach out to me and ask, for someone in their local area, I'm very happy to give a name or someone I may not have actually received their advice, of course, but I do know, I generally know the people who are the good guys of the world, I suppose, the good guys and girls of the financial planning world, and I'm very happy to give some recommendations of people in their local area.
Great. So the best way to reach you, either on Twitter, Justin King CFP, or hello@theretirementcafe.co.uk on email. It's probably the best way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Brilliant. Any final messages you want to leave people with about lifetime financial forecasting?
Just that key message, I think. 2.5, the pound you spend today is going to be 2.5 times that by the time you get to the end of your retirement. You need to cope with that rising inflation. You need to get a plan of how you're going to deal with that, because that's the thing that really eats into your retirement savings, and to be able to adjust for that throughout that retirement is probably the key thing.
Brilliant. Great, thank you. That's it. That's a wrap on lifetime financial forecasting. And the next episode in a couple of weeks' time is going to be all about minimizing lifetime tax.
Yeah, always popular with everybody. It's one of the key questions, of course, people come to us about is how to save tax. So I look forward to talking with you about that one. Thank you, Kathy.
No worries.
Thank you, Kathy, for all your questions. I hope this was a helpful podcast for those listeners considering what steps to take when planning your retirement, or any major life transitions for that matter. As we said, next in this series on the 9 accelerators for a successful retirement is Minimizing Lifetime Tax. So be sure to subscribe to catch that episode when it's released. As always, if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts to help more people like you to find us. Or share this episode with someone you feel will benefit. So until next time, this is Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.